Welcome to the Work Wonders podcast, where we simplify HR for small business. I'm Susan.
And I'm Angela. Let's dive into today's episode and answer what you've been wondering about. So in our last episode, we looked at everything HR that might be encountered by a small business. And in this episode, we're going to drill down on everything you need to know before hiring staff. It's all about compliance, but we promise to make it as interesting as possible. So you'll learn about your obligations as an employer and how to avoid getting in trouble with Fair Work. So let's get started. This is the Work Wonders podcast.
Well, Angela, did you know that just before Christmas last year, an airport shuttle company in Melbourne was taken to court by Fair Work in order to pay $23,310?
Oh my, would you like that for a Christmas present?
Nope.
Well, we'll be using this case as an example in this episode, and you can see how to avoid a situation like this for your business. By the way, in future episodes, we'll be looking at the mechanics of hiring well, something that you absolutely need to listen to in the current labour market. But for now, it's back to basics.
Yes, and there are a few very basic things to keep in mind. 1, you need to know what sort of employment you're offering. 2, know what it's going to cost you. 3, understand the National Employment Standards, or as we'll refer to them, the NES. And 4, be aware of some other things that employers need to do to stay out of trouble.
Okay, so if we look at the first thing, Susan, you mentioned there, knowing the employment type. So what we mean by that is the role full-time, part-time or casual? That's pretty much going to influence everything else you need to do. You also need to know the difference between an employee and a contractor. Independent contractors provide agreed services under a contract for those services, and they usually negotiate their own fees rather than being paid off an award. And they can work for more than one client at a time. They are often called contractors or subcontractors. It's important to know whether the person is a contractor or an employee, and it's determined by the nature of their relationship, not what the arrangement is called.
Yeah, it's also worth noting that there's been 2 cases in February 2022 that mean that Fair Work is reviewing the information that they provide on this. So I think it'd be wise to check for updated info if you're planning to use a contracting arrangement. So once you've defined the type of employment, then you can work out what your new employee is going to cost you. There are obvious costs, and those that are paid directly to the employee. So there's wages, allowances, overtime, penalty rates, leave,
Lots of
like,
things.
Yeah, lots of things. But there's a lot of other costs of employment, both direct and indirect. So obviously there's the PAYG, there's maybe payroll tax, depending on the size of your payroll. There's super, you need your workers' comp insurance. And then, of course, there's other insurance like professional indemnity and public liability. The cost of providing an accessible and safe workplace, the cost of extra equipment you might need, any changes that you might need to make to how you operate, and also the cost of training. So where do we find the pay rates, Angela?
Good place to start. Well, most employees are covered by what we call an award. And once you know the award that applies to you in your industry, you'll be able to find the minimum pay rates in that and all the conditions that come with that. Luckily, the Fair Work Ombudsman make that really easy. They've got a great tool for that, and we'll make sure we pop the link to that in our show notes, because there's a great little tool. You can just jump on there and follow the prompts, type in what industry, what type of role it is, and it will let you know what applies for you.
Excellent. So remember the case I mentioned earlier. This is where it started to go wrong for them. They hired an admin worker in May 2019 who was with them until March 2020. And they paid them $18 to $20 an hour. So in February 2021, an inspector actually issued a compliance notice based on the belief that the worker was underpaid. They were underpaid casual loading, they weren't paid minimum wage, overtime rates and penalty rates for working weekends and public holidays, extra hours that they worked. They were all covered by the Clerk's Private Sector Award 2010.
Okay, so if that employer had used the award and paid actually what was required in that award, they wouldn't have received that compliance notice requiring them to pay nearly $20,000 in back pay, plus super.
Yeah, I know, that's right. But it's not enough to just pay the correct award rate. So in Australia, all employees are entitled to their minimum wage plus the 11 minimum entitlements set out in the National Employment Standards, which is the third thing you need to keep in mind before you hire anyone. So, Angela, can you help us get our head around the 11 minimum entitlements? This is such important information. We'll be giving you more details in future episodes.
Yeah.
But for now, let's use this list.
Yeah.
You can check your knowledge.
Okay, here we go. So the first thing is maximum weekly hours. Now, for most awards, that means around 38 hours a week, and that is just setting that any employee shouldn't be working more than that in a week. The second thing is requests for flexible working arrangements. So employees do have that legal right to be able to request flexible working arrangements if they meet the suitability criteria there. For example, if there's someone that has caring responsibilities and they need to adjust their start and finish times. The third thing is offers and requests to convert from casual to permanent. And we'll absolutely unpack this in a future episode, but there's now an opportunity for casuals to transfer, if they're eligible and the business can do it, over to permanent employment. The fourth thing is parental leave and all the related things that come with that. Some people might know it as maternity leave. It's the right for people to have their job or have time away from their job and be able to come back to it after some time off when they're having a new bub. The fifth thing is annual leave. So for all full-timers, they get a 4-week period of annual leave every year. For part-timers, it would be pro rata. Then we have other types of leave, so personal and carers leave, aka sick leave, and then there's compassionate leave, unpaid, and the newest one, family and domestic violence leave. So the seventh one we have is community service leave, and that's reserved for people that might have a voluntary commitment to something like the RFS or the SES, and that's leave that allows them to go and do their job in that voluntary capacity if they need to. The eighth one is long service leave, and this comes into play for someone that's worked with the same employer for a significant amount of time. And again, it's a paid period of leave after a certain duration of employment, and as long as they meet the criteria. The ninth one is public holidays. So we all love a public holiday off. So this one is depending on your state, whereabouts you are, but the right to be paid for a public holiday and to have it off, or being paid some penalty rates if you need to work during that time, again, depending if that's falling on a normal work day. The 10th one, we're almost there.
So I was just thinking we're going to need a holiday after this.
Is notice of termination and redundancy pay. So this one is in the occasion that employment's ending, how much notice needs to be given to someone if that's going to be happening or if you're resigning. Likewise, how much notice do you need to give? And in the case of redundancy, if that's the situation that you're in, the payment that's required as the final pay. And lucky last, the 11th one is the Fair Work Information Statement, and this is a document that you should give to your new employee when they start with you. Every employee should get this, and if they're casual, there's a second one, rightly named a Casual Employment Info Statement, and that one should be given to them as well. So we will cover all different types of leave entitlements in another episode. And if you employ casuals, our upcoming episode, like I say, on casual conversion will be very soon.
Oh, phew.
It's a big list.
It is a long list. It's a lot to get your head around, but it's also important to understand that you need to meet your obligations under the relevant award and the NES. So there's a free employment contract tool that will help you meet these obligations. We'll put a link in the show notes for this and the other resources that we've been referring to today. We know you can sometimes doubt yourself when you're running a business on your own. There is a wealth of support available if you know where to look for it and who to ask. We're here to help you find what you're looking for. Just get in touch via our website, workwonderspodcast.com.au. So, we've got all that, but we also said that there's some other requirements on employers that you need to know about to ensure you're doing the right thing. The first of these is anti-discrimination legislation. I'm sure you're aware that discrimination is unlawful in Australia. This includes discriminating against applicants. So any new people applying to work at your workplace are covered by anti-discrimination legislation just as much as your existing employees are. And you should not discriminate against anyone for any of the following reasons. You ready for another long list?
Another list?
Yeah. Place of birth or ancestry. social class, their sex, their sexual orientation, their age, disability, marital status, family or carers' responsibilities, pregnancy, religion, political opinion, or union membership. So as you might guess, we're going to be talking about discrimination, harassment, and bullying and your responsibilities in another episode or possibly more. So make sure you subscribe. Now, Angela knows more about the next topic, so over to you, Angela.
Sure. So I just thought I'd touch on single touch payroll. Did you like that, Susan?
Very good.
Single touch payroll is something you will need to set up if you're going to employ people, because it's a requirement to report to the ATO with every pay run that you do. So put simply, what this is a little link between your software that you're using for payroll, so whether you're using, Xero or MYB or whatever you might be using, over to your portal in the ATO. And what that does is it will feed the information to the ATO so that they know your employee is working for you and that they're paying tax, and all that information that comes with what we used to call the group certificate. It just comes more frequently. So I can unpack that in a later episode with more detail, but basically it's another thing to add to the list, Susan.
Yes, this list is getting longer and longer. So speaking of payroll, let's get back to our Melbourne Airport Shuttle Company and their office admin employee. So the result of the compliance notice and their subsequent ignoring of the notice was the High Court ordered them to pay the penalty mentioned earlier of $23,310, plus the back pay they owed. Remember, we said that was around 20 grand. That had to be paid back to the worker, plus interest.
Oh, wow. Okay, so it does seem that Fair Work is motivated to help small business employers do the right thing and not get caught out in that situation. There's a lot of information and advice available, and they're constantly adding more, including training.
That's right, and they've certainly put a lot of work into what they provide. But as a small business, what you also need to keep in mind that although it's good to have the information, there's always a requirement that you will follow it too.
And if I can add, Susan, I think every workplace is different as well, and some things you can implement in a different sort of way, so it's good to get the advice specific to you.
Exactly. So we hope you got some helpful takeaways from today's episode, where we talked about the basic rules around employing new staff, basically your obligations as an employer and how you're going to avoid getting into any trouble.
And did anything come up for you that you need to look into further? Feel free to get in touch with either one of us if you need some help. Both our details are on our website. And remember to check out the show notes, also on our website, to find those links and all those resources we talked about in one handy place.
And remember, subscribe and keep listening to the podcast so you don't miss out on the other special topic episodes that are coming up.
Thanks for listening to the Work Wonders podcast. Hit the subscribe button now to never miss an episode. And if you've enjoyed today, we'd love you to tell your friends and leave us a review. What are you wondering about? Let us know over at our website, workwonderspodcast.com.au. See you in the next episode.